All right, so I guess my original intent today was just to talk about the race a little. As you all know, I'm still working at the Vernon Township job in addition to trying to transition over to the treasurer's office. So I carved out this time for the Korean community to all be together. That being said, Jin wants me to review a little bit about my past history and running for office. Is this something that you guys want me to do? Okay, so a lot of people ask how I got started, and in 2013 I ran for trustee in the village of Mundelein. A bunch of friends and myself started going to the village board meetings, and we were waiting to hear about a certain topic. But when you're new to government, you don't know which meeting to go to, so you just go to all of them. And while we were sitting there and listening to the village board meetings, we could see that they voted against some businesses and allowed some businesses to come in, gave some liquor licenses, but not others. And I really started to get the feeling like they really wanted the corporate businesses, but that they didn't like mom and pop businesses, which is a lot like, the ones in the Korean community, like the ones my parents have. And I didn't think that was fair, and I told my friends that, it's really a numbers game. When you look at the board, even one of the board members says, well, I wouldn't eat at that restaurant, so I don't know about them in town. And I think that's very unfair because, the people should decide. So I had my friends, and I turned to them and I said, we should be running for office because if we voted yes, now that restaurant is in town. And I think some of the reasons that they give are unfair. For example, they didn't give a liquor license to this convenience store owned by Indian liquor store owners. They said it was too close to the high school, but right across the street, even closer to the high school, was CVS, who has a liquor license. So it's reasons like that that just made me angry and upset, and I said we should run. So my friends and I decided to run for office, and I made it in as trustee. One of my friends didn't, but they were appointed to Plan Commission, and so we all got to serve. And in seeing it from the background, I think I realized there's so much that could change. There's so much that could change in the government because these people who are running for office every single day are people who are not more qualified than you or me. Sometimes when they ask you to run for office and you go, me? Oh no, there's smarter people out there or people who can do better and blah, blah, blah. But when you look at the people who are in elected office, sometimes some of them have never worked a job in their entire life. People on the village board where I served, some of them retired after working at the DMV and at the counter, being a cashier for many years. And all of these are fine. It's just though that I would tell you that nobody is better than you are, and you're just as fine, to run for office. In fact, we had someone who ran for village board and got in. They only went up to high school. They never went to college. And so I would encourage anyone to run for office if you feel that that's the calling for you, if your heart is in the right place and you have that passion to fight, especially when you're fighting for good, like small business owners, definitely consider running for office. That being said, once I got in as trustee, I saw some of our negotiations were not as good as they could be in the village. I also saw that we have a problem with flooding in Mundelein, but the current mayor, he didn't make it a priority. He doesn't think flooding's a problem. Yes, pipes cost money, everything costs money, but there's better ways to do things. For example, there was one neighborhood that flooded all the time, and they said in order to change the pipes out, it would probably be $5 million. But I gave the idea that we could buy one of the homes that keep flooding, and no one lives there, and turn it into a retention pond. And if we think of ideas like that, which only cost $500,000, right? There's a huge difference. That not only would it save us money on repaving the road over and over and over, but it will help the businesses that keep flooding right there, in addition to all the homes that are flooding right there. So this is just a small example of how you can think differently than the people who are in leadership, and your ideas can be better, and it can save money. And there's no reason why you should think you're not as good as those people who are currently in office or better. So there was that. I disagreed with him on several things. But politics is politics, and real life is every day. Though, when I see him, and when I see him in town, we're very friendly. I've had coffee with the mayor. Like I said, it's just our policies that we disagree on. So that race, when I announced that I was going to run for mayor, I actually had several options on the table. I had been offered to run for state representative, but what I wanted to do was run for mayor. And so this is something I had to think about for several months. and consult other state representatives. Hey, how much do you make? How is this, in terms of stress, and how is your family life and things like that. I asked them so many questions. And then eventually I decided to go back to my original plan, which was to run for mayor. Because I felt like, if state rep's something I want to do later, I can always go back to it. But right now, I feel like we need someone better for our town. So I chose mayor, especially with the background that I have with my dad and being involved in the JCs. You do a lot of, ribbon cutting, you do a lot of fighting for small business, a lot of in-town fundraisers, cleaning up the street, everything local in that town. And so that's something I really looked forward to. That being said, when I had a volunteer team, it was mostly moms in the town. For my mayor race, I still didn't have a party. And it was interesting because things just fell naturally. It seemed that in town, all the Republicans got behind my opponent, even though I didn't have a party. And so because the Democratic Party saw what was happening, they just chose me. It would just happen by itself because they saw where things were falling. So that being said, I had all these moms in town and friends help me, and we went door to door, and I said, hey, even though we're just running for mayor, we're going to run it like we're running for Congress. I had seen how Robert Dole ran for Congress and how he put, different people in different sections of town so that everyone was touched, right? Everyone had a contact. And so I learned a lot from that congressional campaign and used it in the mayor race. We had a Spanish team, we had an English team. And then what the Democratic Party in that area did for me was they did door-to-door as well, but they also sent out a mailer. They sent out a mailer to everyone who could possibly vote for me, saying, please vote for Holly for mayor and these other people for trustee, because I was running with a slate. The reason I had chosen to do a slate was partly because even if I became mayor, the votes on the board are still stacked against me. And if I could just bring one person in the trustees with me, then the votes would be even. And so it wasn't just like, I want to run for mayor and that's it. It was strategic in that I ran for mayor and I had 3 other people running with me as trustee, because if I was able to pull one of them with me, suddenly the votes on the board would be that much easier instead of having everyone against me. Like I said from the beginning, it's a numbers game, and you have to view it that way. It's almost like a sport. So after I lost the mayor race by 5, I actually went on vacation on 4th of July and thought, this is the first 4th of July I don't have to walk a parade. I don't have to go running around shaking hands and sweating. It's not so bad. But as soon as I got back, of course, there were offers to run for something else, which I didn't expect because I thought that was it. Now I can go relax. I can, have a slow life. But I had offers from both parties. And basically what it was is they saw my effort, they saw what I did. They saw what I did basically without a party, and I did it all myself and with all these people in town. And it was easier for them to talent scout. It's kind of like when a sports team chooses somebody, a college athlete. It's kind of like that. They saw the field and they picked the athlete. So what had been offered to me by the Democratic Party was state rep and state senate. They had offered 2 different state positions, and this is where I'm going to be very honest with the Korean community, in that, one, you always have to think of yourself first, you and your family, your priorities, and what you want to do in life, because a party is a sports team. It's kind of a machine, and they'll use you if they can. It comes with a lot of good, but like I said, at the end of the day, don't lose who you are. So based on what they had offered me, my priorities were, well, I still have small kids. I still, love doing local things in town. I'm not sure I want to drive 4 hours down, 4 hours up, 3 days a week, in Springfield. So that being said, I counter-offered. With, I would like to run for treasurer. And it was funny because, they raised their eyebrow. They were like, treasurer? And they didn't even think about, anyone running for treasurer. And they also told me that the person that I would be running against was the former chairman of Lake County. And that wasn't the only time I heard it. Sometimes when I campaigned, people said, oh, you're going against Stallman. Well, good luck, because, he's so well known. And what I had to provide to them, and so I could sleep at night too, is, well, if you look at the data's actually on my side. So we run the campaign, we do all the paperwork, and it's funny because, to run for something like mayor or trustee, it's 100, 200 signatures. To run for treasurer, I turned in 900 plus signatures, and I couldn't have done it without all these different Democrat groups that were all over Lake County. And the same would happen if you ran as Republican, right? The other clubs, the groups, they help you to get signatures, and you turn it in all together, and it was almost 1,000 signatures. So I'm very grateful for that. Once you run for something higher, it becomes very obvious why you need to pick a party. You can't just do it as an independent, and oddly enough, if you run as independent, you need more signatures legally than either of the two parties. So that's why people end up picking one or the other. So strategically, there's a lot that has to do with numbers in the background. And I not only had Anton, who was my manager for Waukegan, North Chicago, Zion area, I had another manager for the Buffalo Grove, Vernon Hills, Mundelein area, and then another one for the Fox Lake, Volo, out west. The county is very big. The county's so big that I can't do it by myself, and I can't do it with just one other person. So as somebody who does not have, millions of dollars, or, here's the thing, if I ran for state rep or state senate, all this money comes from the party. All this money comes from Springfield, from lobbyists, from people who want you to vote a certain way. Well, luckily for me, I guess, and not lucky, is that I don't have any legislation. I'm the treasurer, so I don't have social issues. I don't have anything where people want to throw money at me in order to, vote a certain way for them. So that being said, I feel like my race was very clean. It was people who donated to me, business owners. I didn't have special interest in my race, and I think that shows in that the vote count included lots of Republicans that crossed over to vote for me as well. Our message was very simple. We're new perspective, new ideas, and we're going to modernize everything. And the message was really interesting because between myself and my opponent, the whole entire race, his was, this is all the treasurer's office does. Like, Holly doesn't understand the job because this is all it does. And she wants to do all these other things that this office doesn't do. And my message was, yeah, we do this. What is this? We send out the bills for your property tax bills. Are you going to get your bills? You're going to get the bills. But we could do so much more. We could do so much more in this office with our existing budget, just even being out in the community, which he isn't. Like, we can do a lot more. That, along with the fact that the chairman stepped down because he had an addiction, the chairman of Lake County, not my opponent, the current chairman, and once that chairman stepped down, we were all able to access the books, things that were hidden for a while because the assistant, the county administrator was part of what was going on with the chairman. So with them both, kind of going to the side, everyone could access these books and see where the misspending was going on, the fact that there were contracts that were not bid, the fact that people who were elected on the board were using their purchasing cards to buy things like greeting cards, to buy themselves a laptop. You're not supposed to. And if they buy one, they're supposed to pay it back. So there's all this misspending going on, but no one realized it because the chairman had acted like everything was fine. So what this created then was a groundswell of people in Lake County who wanted to vote for all the new candidates. Get new people in there who are not part of the corrupt system. But not only that, we're not friends with the system that's in place, so we can call things out. We can hold them accountable. We can make them upset, but that's okay because we're not really there to be their friend. And so these were the platforms we all ran on. And like I said, Lake County is huge. So one of the things I had to focus on myself as county treasurer and having a county-wide race is having endorsements. And endorsements are when people who are currently elected say that they stand with you. And so they hope all their followers will also stand with you as well. And I had some endorsements from small towns that people didn't expect that I would have. Winthrop Harbor, all the way on the corner by the border of Wisconsin. Winthrop Harbor, I had a trustee endorsement there. The mayor of Fox Lake, all the way out west, and that's a Republican town. and trustees in Volo. And I think this helped in that the other countywide candidates like sheriff and clerk, my map shows that I had gains in that area where they didn't. And I think, all of that helped. Not only that, from the very beginning, and I even said to my marketing team, I said I don't want to vilify Republicans. Some Republicans vote for me, and I acknowledge that. And in fact, there are even Trump supporters who love me because they don't want establishment. Really what they want is just someone new who's going to try something different. And so even though my marketing person was a very, very hard Democrat and wrote all these posts, where he would throw in sometimes the word Republican, and I would look at that and say, take that out. I was like, what we need to focus on is the problem, not pointing fingers at each other. And so we made a very conscious effort to do that. We also made a very conscious effort to say we're going to go in and fight corruption. So when you look at my social media, you don't see me vilifying anyone of any party. You also see that there are testimonies I put up there. There's this one who used to be a former boss of mine. I used to work at his company. And he said, in the interview for hiring Holly, she fixed my computer. And it's true because his computer crashed while we were having the interview. But I started a new branch and new efforts in his company during the recession, and he will remember positively forever that I helped bring in more profit while we were having the recession. So his testimony was up there, and he's a very hard Republican. He says, my family never, ever votes for Democrats, but we'll be voting for Holly. And that was a great testimony that we had. And he's not the only one. There are people who private messaged me and said, you're the only Democrat I voted for in my entire life. And even Cash Jackson, who is the governor candidate for the Libertarians, said, I voted for you, Holly. So our message was good. That's what I wanted from the beginning. And, really going back to telling you or any candidates, there's what they want to do, right? And then I had the ability to change the message and say, no, this is what I want, and let's make sure we do that. So there's a lot of effort that we put in. As you know, I was pregnant for half this campaign, and I had the baby June 4th, but July 1st, all the 4th of July parades started, and there's no time to rest. When you have 4th of July parades, you got to do what you got to do, right? I had a moment where I was like, what would Tammy Duckworth do? She had a baby. I was like, I bet she would show up. So I was like, we have to show up too. So we just powered ahead and did everything. We outworked our opponent. But it wasn't only that, because I have to give credit where credit is due. So there's all the work we did, and I think that reflects on the margins between myself and the other countywide races. So I think on the other countywides, we had a slight bump because we had crossover from the Republican side. All the work that we did, all the work that all the different groups in the whole entire county did. But there was also a movement of women, who wanted to vote for women candidates, but also they wanted to go out and vote. They were on fire. Not only that, I do have to say that all the people who were fired up because they're upset about Trump and they disagree with him, they were all empowered to go out there as well. So we had a bunch of waves that were going out to vote in all angles, and all this meant this was probably the highest turnout that has ever been in Lake County in terms of voting in a midterm election, right? So I think either it was comparable to a general election for president, or it passed that, and I don't know because the numbers are still coming in. Actually, to this day, the sheriff's race is still going because they're waiting for all the mail-in ballots to finish, and there's still 1,000 provisional ballots that have been contested on the side that they're trying to work through. So some of these races, they're still going, and even the state rep in my area, which is funny because that's the seat they offered me to run, she is winning by 2 votes. So we're still waiting to see how this all finishes. I believe it's the 23rd or the 20th. By then they'll have a final count, and some of these races will be over. But that's 2 votes, right? I was there with the 5 votes, and that one's a 2-vote race margin right now for state rep. And there's another one in my district too that's county board. and that one's by 14 votes. So things are still hanging out there, and it's still pretty exciting. In fact, I was going around collecting my signs because the race is over, but if they're still in a contested race and they're still waiting on their mail ballots, I left their signs out because, they're still going. But all in all, wow, what an experience it was. And I was saying to someone that way back when I was in college, and I served in the church, and they make you take this talents test, which tells you, which part of the church you should serve or where you're, best and most useful. And I got, number 1 was missionary, and second was voluntary poverty. And at that time, I thought that meant that, I would do missionary work while I was in college. But I couldn't, I was working, eventually, I had kids, I had a family, everything, and I worked at Dr. Poo Kim's office, and funny enough, everyone knows Dr. Poo Kim, and the office manager there told me, Holly, just because you want to do missions work doesn't mean you have to go to a different country. She said, there's lots of opportunity to help people here, where we live. And I remember that, and that was almost like 10 years ago. But in just campaigning around Lake County, I was able to see people in Waukegan, North Chicago, lots of people with need, but people who are on fire for their community, community activists from not only there, Fox Lake, all the senior citizens that are active in their communities. In addition to, you have people like the VFW, the Legion, these people who've come back from wars and they still volunteer in their town. They do pancake breakfast. They do so much work. And here I was volunteering alongside them because that's how I get to know the people in the community, right? Pancake breakfast, the beer tent at the carnival. So all of that, together is really what made this race. In my core team, I had the regional managers, but I also had one person who was in charge of all the outreach. And what worked out great was she was a student at College of Lake County. And so she was very active in clubs, and she was able to assemble teams of students that would go out in the community. And in fact, on election day, they had worked it out that they had a van pool that would come several times a day to the college to pick up students to go vote. And so she had helped me on my mayoral campaign, and I knew she was a hard worker. So I had her in charge of all the door-to-door efforts. So not only did they have student teams, but we also had weekend teams. And I gave that responsibility to her, but she wasn't the only one, because you see all these different branches all over the Lake County, like the Warren Township, the Vernon Township, and Fremont Township. All these townships had their own Democrat groups. And there's a software you can use. And the Republicans have it too. It's just a software that anyone can use to see which doors you should hit that are more likely to vote for you. And so with all of us at the same time using this software all around Lake County, we were able to log, whether this house is likely to vote for me. And closer to the day, if we saw that they didn't early vote yet, we would contact them and say, hey, you said, you're interested in voting for Holly. Just want to make sure you go out and vote. If you need a ride, we can give you a ride. And it's friendly territory. They already committed saying they would vote. And so if they didn't vote by election day, we do another reminder and say, hey, we're willing to go out. We're giving free rides. We'll get you out there. And so it was that kind of an effort that happened all over the county. And what's really interesting is after the race, even yesterday, someone had contacted me saying that they and their group of people who live in Indian Creek, they went door to door for me because I was against the highway expansion, and the highway goes through Indian Creek. And so even though half their group was Republicans, and actually Indian Creek is Republican, they walked their entire neighborhood for me because they're against the highway being built through their town. And so I didn't even know they did that until yesterday. And so it's these kinds of efforts that happened all over. And even when I went to early vote, the lady in front of me in line said, oh, you're Holly Kim. I could tell by your glasses. She goes, I walked for you in Vernon Hills this morning. So she went door to door for me in Vernon Hills that morning, and I didn't even know who they were. So amazingly, there are efforts that were going on the whole time. So that was run by Neela, who does my outreach, and all these groups that I didn't even know were going on. But I also had Anton, who was my person who put signs all over, like Lake County. You go driving down the road and you see signs on the side of the road, that was probably Anton. So not only is he active that way, he knew who I was supposed to talk to in certain towns and like who I needed to get to know. And then he's the one who encouraged me to go visit, the churches in the Waukegan community as well, and he would like take me over there. I had a third person, and this person you barely see. His name is Max Weiss. And he's a student at U of I, and he's graduating soon. But he studies in political science. He also volunteered in several campaigns, and he is what I would call a political nerd. He is so deep in numbers that he talks about statistics, and he crunched so many numbers for me in terms of like, I say, Max, on election day, which is only one day, I was like, I have a whole county, so there's 100 polling places plus, right? Which one am I supposed to go to? He goes, oh, okay, good. So he looks up all the polling places, sorts the data by, how people vote, and the place where it's really highly Dem, you probably don't have to go. Places where it's super Republican, and he goes, but there's all these middle ground places where you can switch someone's vote just by being there in person. And he gave me the top 3 of those. And so data is so important in that way because you're not just blindly showing up to things, and just hoping that it will work. You go to places knowing it'll work. And
My question is, so how did you get those people to get on board your campaign? Because some Korean candidates had very lonely campaign. So I would just want to hear, how did you convince them to work for you?
When you know, I'll know. I mean, it's so funny because the gal Neela who runs my ground game, one of the state rep candidates asked her to join their campaign. And she's like, oh no, I'm helping Holly already. And they said, we'll pay you, I'll pay you money. And she's like, I'm helping Holly. So that state rep candidate called me and said, one of your volunteers turned down my offer. I said I would pay her. And he goes, I don't know, what's going through their minds or why they don't want to help me. And I said, I don't know either. And I said, but I'm thankful. It's these people who have faith in me, they believed in me. And so they're 1,000% for Holly, even though I didn't pay them. I didn't have money to pay them.
Is there any aid from the party or?
No. So if I ran for state rep or state senate, they send somebody. But because I didn't run for anything state related, and like I said, there's no legislation, I was like an island on my own, which was like good and bad. I got to do whatever I want pretty much. And I got to control my own message. So I think there was like a lot of benefit to it. Then again, I was working so hard that I don't know, I think they would have just held me back if I did have more rules put on me.
What do you think is the first thing as a new treasurer of Lake County in your term?
So,
Water.
Thank you. Thanks for the water. Oh, it's hot water. Thanks. Thank you. So I wanted to hit the ground running, and my goals, campaign-wise, were to increase transparency, have them film the finance committees again, get involved in some of the issues that are going on right now, like the state of Illinois wants to propose taking some funds from local towns, sales taxes. And I'm against that. I was against that when I was trustee in Mundelein, and I'm still against that now as treasurer, but I get to say, like, I represent all these towns, and I'm against it, So there's efforts like that. There's more that the treasurer's office can do in terms of outreach, and we're already starting to talk about how to do that, not only in schools, but in communities. I'm already scheduled to do a, talk about our property taxes workshop with the Latino community. They've reached out to me. So we're already scheduling all these, and one of the things I need to do, though, is get into the office, which I start December 3rd. Once I'm sworn in, I can go in and, really look at how things are done. Right now, I'm still on the outside. That being said, usually when you win, you get a call from your opponent, and they say, hey, good job, blah, blah, blah. When I lost mayor, I called the winner, and you don't want to, but there's a part of, this is a sport. And good sportsmanship means you congratulate the other team. And so I said to, the mayor, "Yay, congratulations, you ran a good race. You fought real hard. And if you need anything, if you have any questions, you can always contact me. If you want any ideas, I'll give you my ideas too. You can implement some of them." That being said, for the treasurer, so far I haven't received a call. And that was probably my first indicator that things were not going to be smooth. During a few days later, I saw on his Facebook, somebody sent it to me. They took a picture and sent it to me. That he wrote, "I never thought I would be typing this because I never thought I would lose." He said he's run for almost 30 years in office, and he's never lost one single race. And he said a whole bunch of words, but I think what really made the whole message were the first two lines, right? Like, who starts it off like that? So he's having a hard time. He's having a hard time accepting it, but unfortunately, that also means he's making it harder for me instead of just being gracious about it. So a few days ago, we started the process ourselves. So I'm starting to put a transition team in place. We served legal notice saying, we're going to start looking at the information, and here's all the information that we want, because we have a very real concern that they could be in there messing things up on purpose. So that when I start, everything just explodes, right? And they'll be like, "Look, it's Holly's fault. Look what she did." And I'm being very honest here, because we cannot just think that you run for office and when you win, it's like, "Oh, great," and then now you just start. Because there's still politics, and that's the hard part. So I need to make sure that, one, everything still goes smoothly for Lake County, but then two, that I can do the best job possible for this job. And so we're having the team go in, and they're basically going to be the supports, holding things up and learning everything until things transition over to me, and then the transition team leaves. But it is interesting because you would think that they would help train you. When you take over, just like when you leave a job. I have to train my replacement before I go, leave the company. But yeah, it's interesting.
What can you bring from your experiences as a past Mundelein Permanent trustee?
I think being a trustee in Mundelein really brought my first learnings of politics, and I don't mean like running for office. I mean politics is like behind the scenes, getting the support for some idea that I have. Like on the board, it's a numbers game, right? Unless you have the majority agreeing with you, they won't pass anything that you want to do. They can, in fact, actively choose to obstruct anything you want to do for the next 4 years. So here, where I would use these skills is the treasurer's office is not legislative, but the county board members are. And hopefully on the 20th, when we have the final numbers, it'll remain exactly as it is right now. But currently, for the first time ever in the history of Lake County, the board is majority Democrat. And for me, how that helps me, though, is that I have people who are more willing to accept like the ideas that I have, or for example, if I say, a lot of these elected board members got in trouble using their credit cards. I was like, why don't we just take credit cards away so that they just have to submit a receipt for reimbursement? Because if it's you or me and we're in front of a Starbucks and we have to think about whether we want to reimburse, it's one more second we have to think about it, and then we go, maybe not, we use our own card, right? But if it's the company card, you just use it. So I was like, maybe the idea is to just take them away. But having ideas like that are legislative. So I have to work with the county board members to pass that. That being said, that's not a Republican or a Democrat idea. It's just a fiscal idea. But it's easier to get the support for the votes to do so. And so hopefully, we'll maintain that majority in order to pass some of those ideas that I have. Not only that, I also want the ability to put all of the contracts online and our financials, because currently you have to file paperwork. You have to file a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, in order to get that information. But we pay those taxes, right? People should know where their money's going. And in the city of Chicago and some of the other counties, they already put it up online. So if we just catch up, but I have to get the support, in order to do that. And that's where the politics part comes, is having those good relationships with the people who are going to vote. And yeah.
No. Okay, I know this is too early to ask you. What is your political goals?
So it's funny because I don't really have any. I never thought I'd be running for treasurer, right? I mean, I knew one day I'd run for mayor when I was trustee because I love doing local things in town. I didn't think this was going to happen. That being said, when a path is lit up, you have the option to take it, right? But before I take it, I do a lot of research. I do a lot of thinking about it. Like I said, they offered two different paths, state rep, state senate. I took a third path that wasn't even offered to me. So that being said, I don't have like a long-term goal. My current short-term goal, though, is to do the best job possible for this, because I did say to my volunteers, I go, if we do a great job, we could be like Jesse White. I mean, you could be treasurer forever, right? And when you go to vote and you see the names, you go, oh, who else would we put? But, Jesse White, so we could be similar like that, Holly Kim, and that Lake County treasurer. I said, but for that to happen, we have to do a great job. Not only that, we have to continue being out in the community, being there for the people. So let's do that. And then if history repeats itself, maybe something will be offered. One thing that I found out too about parties, because I didn't grow up in a party, is that if they think you'll do well, they'll offer something to you. So, but for right now, especially with the baby that's like 5 months old, staying near home is goal number one, and going home at the end of the day is definitely,
Regarding your family, how can you handle, family work and, this campaign at the same time? Can you explain the family support during the campaigning?
Yeah. So I'm very lucky in that my oldest kids are now like 15 and 13. So it's not like, all my kids are small. But that being said, I do definitely put it in my Google Calendar. There are certain days and certain times where I say my kid's band concert or Kelly's basketball game. Like, I don't go to all the basketball games, but I will try to make some of them. Because, one thing you don't want is your kids and your family to go crazy and awry. Because if you can't even control this, this small cup of your family, then how can you control, how can you work the whole county? How can you run things even bigger if you can't even run this? So I definitely make it a point to not only have balance there, but one thing that's very important to me, and I talk about with lots of other candidates, is mental health. I see them run really tired sometimes. They get upset about what other people say about them. It's definitely a sport, and it's not only a sport on your body, it's a sport on your mind. People say bad things about you all the time. And mental health needs to be number one as well, because if that gets affected, then your health gets affected. Everything starts going downhill. And so for me, I coach my family through it too. My husband's been very supportive, very helpful, and he was a teacher, so he had the summer off while I had the baby, so that worked out really well. And then we have childcare, the kids help, but we have everything covered. Everything's like a machine, a well-oiled machine in terms of childcare and everything being covered, paying bills, all that, and working. Now I have to, go back to my job, and until the swear-in on December 3rd. But you have to just make sure to be very organized, right? And I don't have, aside from like my dad over in Barrington and my mom when she's in town, but I don't have any other relatives here. I don't have cousins, uncles. So I'm also, it's also very important to me to utilize my friends that I have in Mundelein, which are other moms. And only once or twice I said, hey, could you watch, my kids and just heat up a pizza for them just so they're not by themselves tonight, and I'll be back at 7:30, but I just need someone to put the pizza in the oven, like just something like that. Just make sure, the little guy is not on the computer all night long. Just tell him to do his homework, and then I'll be there by 7:30, but just somebody needs to make sure that he's doing his homework. And they'll be like, okay. But because like I said, you want to make sure that you can run a smaller machine before you can run a bigger machine. So I would just say time management skills, and I learned that honestly from the JCs. Because when you're in the JCs, you go to so many meetings, and then from the big meeting to like the subcommittee meetings, and then all the events, and there's not much difference in pace from being in a volunteer organization to running for office, which is why so many people who are in those organizations, they run for office later, because there's not much difference in that pace.
Do you have any plan or idea regarding Korean or Asian American initiative? I know it's not directly related to the job of treasurer.
The only thing I think of right off the top of my head is just like we're doing the property tax information workshop for the Latino community, like we could do one for the Korean community as well. That being said, as someone who's definitely new to this office, if there's any ideas that people have in the Korean community and they feel that there's a way this can merge, like for sure, reach out to me. Let me know, because one of the goals and platforms has been that outreach was poor in this office, and now it's going to change. Not only do you have someone who has access to the ability to speak different languages, but also wants to be out into the community. And I want to be all over Lake County, and I'm willing to do so. So if there's any ideas, let me know. But aside from that, I think what would be most natural is probably just talking about property taxes and your bill, and what part of your bill goes to your town, the schools, that kind of information is really useful.
You got a lot of support from Korean American community in Chicago. And do you ever think about your election will be some kind of effect to Korean American community?
In Chicago?
Yes.
So I wouldn't say Chicago so much as Cook County. There's a lot of Koreans that live in Northbrook and Glenview, and even Niles. And I was really lucky in that growing up, my parents were very active in the Korean community, and so I really owe the involvement and thanks to them because all their friends in the Korean community help support me, right? And some of them even they'll come to my fundraisers. They don't live in Lake County, but to them, they feel like they're supporting their own daughter because they saw me since I was a small kid. And now, to see me running for office, they're like, oh, that's practically my kid too, because I saw her so many times. Or I went so many times to their house to eat dinner that now it's practically like seeing my own kid run for office. And because they can't go door to door, there is a language barrier, right? And not only a language barrier, not everyone wants to go door to door and knock at, people's houses. And so they help in the way that they can. So if they want to be involved, the things that they could do, they've come to fundraisers. Sometimes they send a check even without going to the fundraisers. Some of them will, call their friends, or they'll talk to their friends at church and say, hey, don't forget to vote for my friend's daughter, Holly, or don't forget to vote for Holly, And so they did, work in the background. And, honestly, without all the money from special interest groups, it was so valuable to have that funding from the Korean community, because if not, from them and from these business owners and, even Tom Suh gave thousands. And if not for him, I cannot compete at the same level as all these other people who are getting money from special interest groups. And that's why I think there's something very wholesome about my campaign, in that it wasn't this dark money. It wasn't these people who paid me to vote a certain way. It was just honest, everyday people who just wanted to see me do well.